2, 1.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mayor Cyril Jefferson convening a special meeting of the High Point City Council. Here with us in the room, we've got every member of council present, save Councilmember Johnson. We also have Madam Clerk, Attorney, and Manager with us. In this manager's briefing, we'll be hearing about our budget as well as water distribution, water quality. But prior to getting to those items, I'll actually ask if there is a motion to approve and adopt our agenda for today.
So moved. Second.
Motion is made by Councilmember Holmes, seconded by Councilmember Andrew. Any discussion on the motion to adopt our agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it, and we have our agenda. First item is item 2025-162, fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget presentation. With that, I'll hand it over to our city manager, Tasha Logan Ford.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. We are getting ready to share with you the proposed budget the staff has been working through for the past several months. Just to give a little bit of history, we started this process actually back in November when we first had the retreat with council. So in this budget, you'll see that we've actually worked in the strategic priorities from council with those goal areas that you had. And we also try to identify specific projects that go in there as well. I know the question that's always asked is, yes, the budget that we present to you all is balanced. There is no tax increase that is part of this budget, but there are some fee increases that we'll talk through. But these are ones that we've talked about over time as they're related to our water and sewer utility and explain why those are in there. There are also some changes that we have to optimize some functions within the city. It's hard to recommend a lot of staffing increases as we're working through a budget, especially thinking about just the economy that we're in. But the positions that are being requested as part of this budget are all areas where we feel like we need some additional capacity so that we can be able to deliver the services. Some of them are actually service enhancements, particularly around the police department, where we want to implement our civilian traffic investigators. New positions are being requested there because you cannot use existing positions based off the legislation that was passed if you want to implement that program. But that's important for us because we're thinking about how do we optimize the existing staff that we have, and if there are functions that can be done with non-sworn employees, then that's what we're looking to do. So with that, I want to go ahead and have Stephen introduce this budget and we'll walk through it. As we're going through the budget today, we'll go into a little bit more detail during this work session. It'll also be presented just for the public at our regular meeting. That'll start at 5:30. And as there are questions that council members ask, staff will keep a note of those, and we want to make sure that we address those questions when we have our first budget work session, and those dates will be shared with you as well. I've already gotten a few questions, and I'm keeping a list of those, but as questions come about today, staff will keep note of those too, and then we'll have the discussion to make sure that we're meeting the priorities of council as we work through this process. So thank you all for the opportunity to present this to you, and I'll hand it over to Stephen.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the City Council. Stephen Haberluck, the Budget and Performance Director for the City of High Point. As the manager alluded to, the FY 2025-26 proposed budget is balanced in accordance with North Carolina general statutes. An official copy has been filed with the city clerk. There's a copy that is available at our library for public inspection. It's available on the city website, both on the main landing page, kind of at the bottom where there is news, as well as on the budget and evaluation page. There's a link to a full PDF with the table of contents that is bookmarked to navigate from different section to section, and it's also in flipbook form, similar to some other documents we put on our website. We've provided hard copies of the proposed budget. It is available online if you want to do a non-paper version. We will take those back. We recycle the binders from time to time. We recycle the paper. And so we just wanted to make sure it was available to you, but we do. Part of the reason we 3-hole punch it is so we can kind of reuse as the binders have a shelf life.
Thank you.
I will note there is an item at tonight's council meeting which will be asking you to officially set the calendar and the public hearing. Just a high-level overview of what we're going to talk about this afternoon. We're going to talk about the total budget. We're going to go through some budget highlights, both on the revenue and on the expenditure side. We're going to go a little bit more on the strategic plan investments that are in this proposed budget. And then we're going to touch at a kind of high level, looking at what's in the general fund and some of our major enterprise funds, specifically water, sewer, electric, solid waste, and stormwater. We'll touch very briefly on the capital improvement program, and then we'll talk about next steps, which will include the budget calendar. And so before we go into the kind of number details on the total budget, a little bit about the goals, realities, and challenges in this budget. Salaries and benefits are always one of our top drivers of expense. Those are rising on an annual basis, and so that's always a big pressure. Also, working to align the budget with the mayor and city council strategic priorities. We'll talk a little bit more about the strategic plan later in this presentation, but that was something we made an intentional effort to see where are we making investments and how does it align with some of those goals that you set back in November. And then talk about the national, regional, and state economic picture. Consumer confidence is wavering. Some folks, feeling very confident in the economy, others not so much. There's a little bit of uncertainty, and so we're trying to see, does that and will that affect any of our revenues? Most of our revenue growth is in a more traditional sense. And I say traditional because post-pandemic, you saw with inflation and also a rise in spending, some sales tax growth that was pushing double-digit levels. We are not in that reality anymore. We've been a little bit more conservative with our sales tax estimates. We'll talk a little bit about that. That's the one that's probably most directly impacted by what happens in the economy. So looking at the total budget, and this is just a pie chart showing it by fund, the total budget is $537.9 million. The general fund in this lower left is the largest piece at about 28.5%. And then electric is next very closely at 25.4%. I will note, as we have in the past, part of that electric budget is the city purchasing wholesale power, which is then sold back to customers. That's a $75 million expenditure. So if you looked at this budget versus a jurisdiction that didn't have an electric department, they're not going to have that large wholesale power expense. And so that's just one of those things where, why is our budget, closer to Greensboro's? Well, they're a bigger city, but they don't have that wholesale power cost. Those general fund and electric make up a little over almost 54% of the total budget. Water sewer is the next largest in that upper left at about 14% of the total budget. Looking at revenues kind of by category, and these are our major revenue categories. You see the total at the bottom, $537,994,228, about a 19.2% increase, which is about 3.7%. Looking at just some of these fund balance, you see that as a reduction of almost $5.9 million. The general fund does not have any appropriation of fund balance. Fund balance is used in some of our other funds. It helps pay for capital projects as well as some other things, and we'll talk about that as we kind of dive throughout the presentation. Sales and use taxes, you see an increase of $3.1 million or about 7%. That's not only retail sales, but also our occupancy tax revenues, as well as sales tax on electric and natural gas utilities. And so again, we'll talk about more. As I just said, we're being more conservative with sales tax. That's kind of our retail sales tax, but there is some growth in some other areas that has kind of helped pick up what we may not see on retail sales. Charges for service, which is our largest revenue category. This is all our enterprise fund revenue. Water sewer rates, electric rates, solid waste, stormwater are the kind of major areas for those charges for service. And then miscellaneous, and so this is where investment income falls in, which is driving a little bit of that $900,000 increase, and there's some other internal revenue charges that make up that. Looking at it on the expenditure side, personnel services, $181 million. That's about 33% of the total budget. Operating is about 40% of the budget, but operating includes that wholesale power cost. If we controlled for that wholesale power, operating expenses are about not quite 25% of the total budget. And so that's just one thing that drives that higher than what you might see if you looked at some other kind of makeup of this for other local governments. I will note down on the interfund transfers, you see about a $9.6 million increase, 19.1%. This is kind of an accounting situation where water sewer capital, we have a capital fund for water sewer capital. It's funded by a transfer from the water sewer operating fund. And so, if that capital increases, the transfer increases. And so some of those increases are on some solid waste projects, some electric projects, as well as some water sewer capital. And so that's a big driver of that 19% increase there in interfund transfers. The next section is budget highlights, and we'll start kind of looking at a little bit of detail what's going behind some of those revenues. So the proposed budget maintains a property tax rate of 64.75 cents per $100 of valuation. As it has in the past, the property tax rate is broken between the general fund and the debt service fund, 61.35 cents for the general fund and 3.4 cents for the debt service fund. The budget includes a proposed 8% increase in water sewer rates. There is no increase to stormwater rates or electric rates. This past year, Public Services, and mainly the Solid Waste Division, has been undergoing a feasibility study, and that's been looking at not just their operation, but also their financial health, both in the short term and long term. And out of that study came some recommendations, and staff kind of got together and looked at those recommendations and came up with the following fee changes that are necessary for solid waste. Those include a $1 per month increase to the landfill post-closure fee. That's currently $5 a month. The proposed increases that to $6 a month. And then some increases on tipping fees at the various solid waste facilities. $6 per ton increase at Kersey Valley Landfill, bringing the tipping fee from $42 a ton to $48 a ton. $5 a ton at the MRF, bringing it from $30 a ton to $35 a ton. And then $6 a ton increase for yard waste at the Ingleside composting facility, bringing that from $36 a ton to $41 per ton. Additional fee changes, or not really fee change, more of a service level change, a proposal to close the North Point customer service payment location. So a little bit on this. This would be effective on October 1st in an effort to educate citizens that are still going to that location for in-person payments. Along with that education would be notifying those customers of the other ways you can pay your utility bills, which include in-person here at City Hall, online, via text, at major participating retailers like Walmart, over the phone, via an automatic payment setup, and also instant payment network, which is kind of, if you have a way to do a push notification. And so part of this would be educating those that are using that service. They don't have to immediately come down here. There are other options for how they can pay their utility bills. And next, an elimination of the business license registration fee for customer service. This is a fee that is kind of self-reported, and staff really isn't able to enforce it. It's $25 per business if a business so chooses to. Administratively burdensome. Originally intended as a way to keep records of businesses in the city, but with advances in technology and record keeping, there are other ways for customer service in the city to have those records.
There's one thing I wanted, I'm sorry, Mayor.
I was gonna say, are we gonna hear about that bullet point at some point about why we're closing North Point?
North Point, we can talk more about North Point, absolutely. One of the driving factors behind North Point is that we have other ways for people to make payments now, and there are a number of different ways, especially since we expanded where they can make payments at retail locations, still coming to City Hall, but they can also make them online or through text messaging. I think the other piece too, on the business license piece, as we're going through the process now of updating our systems, our financial systems, think about Workday and Kayenta as we're transitioning there. If we were to keep this business license registration fee, that would require us to have some specialized configurations so that we would still be able to do that. So one of the reasons that we're also recommending eliminating that, in addition to just the administrative side of it, is it would increase the cost that we have associated with those programs for us to be able to have a specialized operation with those to still collect the business registration fee. So we want to make sure that we're not adding costs to the long-term sustainability of those new programs that we're rolling in as well.
Can I assume that closing that location would enable us to repurpose the location for some other personnel needs?
We could repurpose the space as well, yes.
Just to follow up to that real quick, Mayor, at the NLC meeting of finance, the mayor of Detroit several months ago has gone out, and as technology and other ways of paying come in, they're even using other types of currencies, forms of crypto. They're trying different things along this line to cut down on the fiscal. They're not cutting it out totally for people, but retail locations really, if you're out shopping or whatever, you can pay it there. So there's a lot of different strategies coming out about this.
Is anybody being laid off in that process?
No,
They will be moved.
The employees that are working in North Point would be moved, and they would fulfill functions here at City Hall.
Awesome, thank you.
Some other fee changes in the proposed budget. This isn't really on electric rates, but it is with the electric department, and consolidation and an updating of their outdoor lighting fees. There's a change to the Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard, or REPS charge, and that's a pass-through charge for electric to the power agency. And then there are proposed changes to fire inspection fees, theater auditorium rates, water service and meter fees for the water sewer function, cemetery fees for public services, dead animal pickup, and this will be for veterinarians who are requesting the service for public services, and then also a transit fare for veterans and students, and this is a reduction in the fee. It's currently $1.25, and it would be reduced to 50 cents for those who provide proof that they are a veteran or a student. These are kind of bullets, and they're a little higher level. At our first work session next week, we traditionally go into a little bit more detail on not just these fee increases, but the other ones you've seen. So there's also more information as well in the budget document.
One more question on that water service fees. Is that like across the board, or would it be dependent on?
Depends on meter size.
Okay.
It's mostly as a cost recovery purpose, but we'll have those details next week. Talking a little bit more about property taxes, 1 cent will generate $1,397,413. This is based on a valuation of $14,079,860,274, which is a 2.2% increase from the current year's valuation. It's about a $302 million increase in valuation. The property tax budget is based on a collection rate of 99.36%, and that's the breakdown by fund, as I alluded to earlier. I will just mention, of our tax base, Guilford County is a little over 93% of our total tax base, and we estimate tax base growth for Guilford County to go up about 1.8%. And so that drives a lot of the valuation because they make up such a large part of our total valuation. Looking at sales tax, and just a reminder on sales tax distribution, we are unique in that we are in 4 counties, and so we have 4 counties deciding how our sales tax is distributed to us. And so it's determined by counties. Davidson and Randolph are on a per capita distribution, which means just a percentage of the population. And Forsyth and Guilford are on the ad valorem basis, which is a percentage of your total property tax revenues. So for your ad valorem distribution to change, you need your valuation to change or your tax rate to change. We talked a little bit last year about the Guilford County ad valorem percentage, and we're talking about it again this year. And so in 23-24, High Point share of Guilford County sales tax was a little over 9%. In that budget, Greensboro raised taxes, which increased their share of ad valorem. Our share went down, which was in effect for this current year. So that's that FY 24-25, 8.76%.
Can you put a dollar figure on that for people?
That was estimated around 750,000 or so. Last year, the High Point budget went up 3 cents. Guilford and Greensboro kept their rates level. The smaller jurisdictions have such a small share that if they do things, their valuation or property tax, it'd be very difficult to make as big of an impact as the larger jurisdictions. And so we're projecting that our ad valorem distribution percentage will increase back to a little over 9%. What that means is about $716,000 in additional sales tax based on our year-end estimates and based on our estimates. So even with sales tax potentially slowing down a bit, we have growth at about 1.5% above our projected year-end for next year. We are still seeing some additional sales tax because that property tax change that occurred last year.
And do we know the impact if a state allows Stokesdale to take out their per capita with their proposed legislation, what that impact will be to High Point?
We do. We've ran those numbers, and if, I think it's House Bill, I think 305, that is moving, that addresses Stokesdale's desire to have a portion of sales tax go to that city. And it would be roughly $17,000 for High Point. It's not a significant financial impact, but our concern with that is that it just changes the distribution formula for a community that has other means to be able to raise revenue that they're looking. The way that legislation reads is that for cities that do not collect a property tax rate, they can receive a distribution of the sales tax revenue that comes into Guilford County. So although the number may seem like it's fairly small, long-term, what that impact can mean and the method is still concerning for
Well, and the
us.
chain reaction if other
Cities
municipalities try
Do
to
it, exactly.
There is a delay of a year before any changes to the ad valorem percentage, and so anything that the Guilford County or City of Greensville did in their budgets upcoming would not affect the budget we are discussing for next year. It would happen in the year after, which, gives jurisdictions time to plan if we think there are changes that are going to happen. Fingers crossed that there are no changes, because some of this fluctuation from year to year does present a challenge on the revenue side. Just a few highlights on the expenditure side before we get into the strategic plan investments. Based on policy, there is an increase of 3% to the mayor and city council expense allowance. This is based on Southeast CPI for a time period that was similar and consistent with the increase from last year. The proposed budget includes about $6 million for vehicle and rolling stock replacements. This includes replacement of fire apparatus. On the annual nonprofit funding side, 1/3 of a penny is traditionally set aside for the nonprofit application process. That is estimated to be slightly over $465,000 for next year. The budget does not include funding for Southwest Renewal Foundation, the High Point Schools Partnership, or the University of North Carolina Greensboro Center for Housing and Community Studies. This is the team program that they partner with Legal Aid of North Carolina for. That is tenant education, advocacy, and mediation.
I wanted to speak briefly to this item because as it's listed there, it looks like the funding for the agencies at the bottom was part of the nonprofit allocation process, and it was not. The Southwest Renewal Foundation was a separate allocation that would come out of the general fund budget. The High Point Schools Partnership was funded in the past, and that was funded out of ARPA-enabled funds that the city of High Point received. And then the University of North Carolina Greensboro, their request came in, I think it was for $150,000. It's not an agency that we funded in the past, but it aligned with the strategic priorities that council has around preventing homelessness and having a stable economy. So those requests were not included, but I also did want to note that there is still roughly $150,000 of unallocated ARPA-enabled dollars. So if there was parts of these functions that you all wanted to consider, that there are some other options there. But the way it's listed, I just want to make sure that's clear that those were not agencies that typically would go under the normal agency process. They had been funded in the past through other means.
Okay, I have a question. So the High Point Schools Partnership, had they ever applied through the nonprofit allocation?
They had not.
Okay, so the only one of those three that had before is the Southwest Renewal Foundation, is that correct?
The Southwest Renewal Foundation did not apply through the nonprofit.
Well, not this year, but they
Not
had
this year.
before.
In the past, they have.
Right,
High Point Schools Partnership had not
Right.
in the past, and the University of North Carolina Greensboro had not in the
so the
past.
only one that has in the past is the Southwest Renewal Foundation.
Correct.
Okay, so I've already made it very clear how I feel about that, and I know that this is just an initial, so I'll wait, but,
And I wanted to clarify too that the UNCG group, they come to help advocate for in eviction cases
They do.
here at the courthouse. And so we would lose that advocacy for,
It's, from the proposal that they provided, they would be looking to expand the number of days that they have at High Point. They did not say specifically if they did not receive additional funding, if they would cease the current support that they have. So I think that's a question we could ask them. But I think they wanted to increase the number of days that they're at the courthouse for another 2 days with the funding that they would receive from us in High Point.
and one other question. So when those three were chosen, so were there reasoning behind each one separately? I mean, I'm trying to figure out what the reasoning behind the Southwest Renewal Foundation
Chosen for
would have
what?
been, to not receive the allocation that they,
So when we looked at what we have here, Southwest Renewal Foundation, their, based on the current agreements that we have in place with them, their funding was not for operating, it was for grant matches. It could be used for historic signage and watershed improvement projects. So the rationale with Southwest Renewal Foundation is, as grants are coming in, that we would look at those on a case-by-case basis because the landscape of our grants has changed so much in this last year that we're really unsure about what it looks like and what projects would be available. The High Point Schools Partnership, that again was request that was funded through ARPA-enabled dollars, and it was kind of a one-year annual request. And as they came back this year, they want to be able to continue their programs. Their programs are ongoing and operating as well, and they support our schools. And then the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, these are just the 3 that were received. We have not funded them in the past, but again, what they're doing aligns with one of the council's strategic priorities. But we have not funded them in the past, so that's why those 3 are there.
And out of those 3, I just need to make this for the public record. Out of those 3, there's only one that actually writes grants that's given to the city of High Point. Steve, could you please find out what that number is of how much money they've received for the city of High Point in the last 5 years?
Thanks.
Lastly, on budget highlights, did want to touch on our self-funded health insurance program. The proposed budget does include a 5% increase in what the city contributes per employee, but there is no increase coming out of what employees currently contribute. It fully funds the employee health clinic, but there are some proposed changes to retiree health insurance. So currently, someone who retires from the city is eligible to stay on our health insurance plan until they're eligible for Medicare. And so we are proposing an increase in what the retirees contribute out of pocket. Our city subsidy has grown drastically over the past few years for this to a point that we believe it's unsustainable in the long term. And during open enrollment, HR is going to work with our consultant to talk about other plan options that are not the city's plan that may be available on the healthcare marketplace. Some preliminary research was done, and there may be better bang for the buck for the retirees on that. We're not saying to eliminate this service. We're just, assisting the city's coverage with how we're able to pay for it long term, but also let those who are using this, like, hey, here's what else is out there. Let us provide education on what that is. So that'll be done during open enrollment in the fall.
And we do have roughly 40 retirees that are still on our health plan. And the way the costs are trending now, it's like we'll need to do double-digit increases to be able to help them really cover the cost that the city's planning to subsidize that. So that's why it's important for us to be able to plan and give people enough time in open enrollment, which I do believe is in October timeframe, if they need to make the transition.
Our concern on that rising drastically is when we brought forth the proposal to go self-funded, the projections aren't what they currently show. And so it's just something we're trying to keep in mind and take seriously since we're still just a couple years into transitioning back to being self-funded with our health insurance program. The next section, we're going to talk about strategic plan investments. And so just real brief, in November, you all held a strategic plan retreat. In that retreat, you set some new goals and also align your strategic initiatives within those goals. And if you recall during that retreat, there was some talk about as your strategic plan evolves, you're going to start working your budget to align with your strategic plan. It doesn't align perfectly. I would say this is a first step, but we did try to see what investments are in this proposed budget and how do they align with your strategic goals in the strategic plan. And so going through the 6 goal areas, first, the thriving economy. The proposed budget increases annual funding to downtown High Point by 25%, which totals $62,500. This proposed use would assist with funding for Social Saturday, the creation of a Cinema Saturday, and additional partnership mixers. It allocates $350,000 to be used on furniture, fixtures, and equipment for the commercial shared use kitchen. If you recall, last year during this time, we kind of had a 2-year funding plan for the furniture, fixtures, and equipment. It was $350,000 in the current budget. This is that next half of $350,000 to cover that. And the budget also continues funding of the city's economic development incentive program, and this is to pay out current incentives, but also make funding available if future incentives are proposed to council and ultimately approved by council.
Steve, is this a good place to pause and talk about the MSD? As part of the council's retreat, there was an interest for us to look at increasing funding to downtown High Point, which is why you see this 25% increase here. This is less than what the agency requested, and we also wanted to make sure that we would have another conversation with council about your interest in establishing an MSD for downtown. There are existing boundaries that came out of the downtown strategic plan, but I think it's important for council to understand that when the MSD is established, that the additional revenue that you receive from the MSD cannot be used to supplant the existing budget. So if we move forward this year and increase the budget for downtown High Point by 25%, that becomes the base budget. We'll have to make sure that we maintain that level of funding moving forward once the MSD is established. There's also a process when you establish a municipal service district where you have to bid out the services that are going to be provided. And typically you bid out those services at least every 5 years to give agencies the opportunity to say whether or not they would like to compete and provide those services for the city or for the organization. So we're gonna do a little bit more in-depth discussion about the MSD because I think that will help inform the decision as to is it prudent for us to do the increase this year, or should we pursue the MSD and try to have a sustainable source of funding for the organization moving forward? But then also just to make sure that you all understand the timeline and the bidding requirements that are associated with establishing the MSD. So we have some good examples of where that's been done in some other communities.
Looking at the goal area of effective communication and engagement, the budget continues funding for the new civic clerk legislative solution. The High Point Citizens Academy, which will be beginning this fall 2025. There's an allocation of $200,000 to replace the public address system at the High Point Theater. There's an updated fee structure and business plan for the High Point Theater, and the continued recurring investment of $250,000 for marketing branding efforts. When the new branding came about, there was an initial $250,000, and we've kept that as a recurring funding to continue those efforts on an annual basis. Looking at proactive urban design and planning, $190,000 allocated for parking lot and restroom improvements at the former American Legion site near City Lake Park. There's an allocation of slightly over $385,000 for paratransit vehicle replacement. And that's the total allocation. The city has a 10% match in that. It's shared between the state and the federal government. That local match for the city will be $38,580. And there's also continued support to planning and development for the implementation of the 2045 Comprehensive Plan, and that includes the updating of the Unified Development Ordinance, or UDO. The goal area of resilient community, as the manager alluded to, the addition of 3 civilian traffic investigator positions for the police department. These would be non-sworn positions that would investigate minor traffic crashes. There's also funding for several new types of public safety software. Some of those examples include kind of a law enforcement search engine equivalent, a mobile device data extraction tool, and also access to some national crime databases. The budget also includes an addition of an administrative specialist position in the fire department. Some of the fire command staff have kind of taken on some of these administrative duties, and it's gotten to a point where an administrative specialist could kind of help with as a backup for payroll, for timekeeping, reports, things of that nature, to kind of take that burden off some of the certified fire leadership that are currently performing those tasks. There's an allocation of $250,000 for fire station upgrades and renovations. And there's funding for the fire apparatus replacement program, $1.225 million for a pumper replacement and other fire equipment, including station generators, jaws of life, and thermal imaging cameras. That $1.225 million, that's a $125,000 increase from the current year's budget. And in FY 22-23, we budgeted $751,000 for a replacement pumper. And so in about 4 years, not quite doubled, but it's getting close to that. Seems to be going up every year. Looking at the effective infrastructure and public utilities strategic plan goal, there's an allocation of $250,000 for new sidewalks and maintenance of existing sidewalks. There's an increase of $612,000 to the annual street resurfacing budget. This is funded by an increase in POW bill revenues, which are allocated by the state. It's gone up about that much over the past 2 years, and so last year it was used to purchase an asphalt paver, and now we've repurposed that and taken the additional increase to increase the annual street resurfacing budget. And there's also an allocation of $250,000 for bridge maintenance and repair projects.
Do we know which bridges? I mean, do you have a list of the bridges that?
We can provide the ones that are the highest priority bridges. Looking at additionally on effective infrastructure and public utilities, the addition of a water resources director for water sewer due to drastically increasing infrastructure needs, increased regulatory requirements, demands of the system. The addition of this position would split water sewer out from public services and create a new water resources department. There's also a proposed position, a relief operator at the West Side wastewater treatment plant. So this would be a plant operator, but would also kind of provide on-call services, and so there'd be more on-call, so not everyone is on call every weekend. Provide some relief to some of those staff there at that plant. And also the addition of a power line technician for the electric department as the infrastructure of the system and the growing needs of the system expand. That's why they need this position. And the last goal of high-performing organization, the proposed budget fully funds the city's pay-for-performance program, which is an average 3% mid-year merit pay adjustment. It also funds Phase 1 compensation and classification recommendations. So this year, a new consultant was chosen. And that new consultant came with some new ideas, and this implementation for Phase 1 will hopefully address some compression issues that we may not have been able to address in previous compensation and classification studies. And the budget also proposes an additional city holiday at Christmas. This would bring the total city holidays to 13, and is based on some benchmarking data that Human Resources put together and would better align our holiday schedule with that of neighboring jurisdictions. Again, on high-performing organization, there's $1.2 million for, this is kind of the capital hardware behind the Workday Enterprise Resource Planning ERP system upgrade. That upgrade is currently underway and has a fall 2025 go live date. And this includes our payroll function, our accounting function, cash management, recruiting, timekeeping, as well as some other kind of services. Some of those are in standalone systems, not just replacing one system. We're kind of consolidating. And so it's been a major undertaking, and excited to be going live in the fall. The budget also includes an additional budget analyst position in the budget and evaluation department, and 2 positions in information technology, a cybersecurity analyst and an information technology analyst. And these would assist with maintaining IT systems. We have a growing number of applications and solutions, and so just having that additional IT support can help those departments who are using those systems, and also always keep us on alert to help prevent cyber attacks. Now we're going to touch a little high level going into the general fund, and then we'll talk about the enterprise funds. And so this is a similar table from the total budget, but it's just for the general fund. I will point on the revenue side to just the bottom number. The general fund budget totals $153,485,824, which is about a 4.4% increase from the current year. Property taxes are the largest revenue source. They make up about 56.1% of the total revenues for the general fund, and sales and use taxes are the next highest at about 26.4%. So about 82% between those two revenue categories. As we mentioned earlier, the property tax is maintained at 64.75 cents. 61.35 cents of that is allocated to the general fund. On sales and use tax, we talked about the increased ad valorem distribution percentage. There's also some increases in the sales tax we receive for electric and natural gas utilities. On the intergovernmental revenues, that is driven by those POW bill increases that are allocated by the state for street maintenance. But we've also programmed an expenditure to kind of meet that. The state wants that revenue used for street maintenance, and so that's why we're increasing the street resurfacing budget to make up for that increased revenue. Increases in charges for service are mainly due to the new proposed theater fees to go along with their new business plan. And in the miscellaneous revenue section, investment income has remained strong, and that's pushing some of the increases in that category. Similar table, but for the expenditure side, personnel services are the largest expense in the general fund, not quite 71% of the total budget. Provide some more details on what's driving some of these changes in the next few slides. On the personnel side, we talked about the pay for performance program citywide. The general fund has the most city employees, and so that's going to be a big driver of your expenses and any increases there, as well as your phase 1 compensation and classification recommendations. This third bullet, the required increase to the city's contribution to Elders, the local government employees retirement system. I feel like a broken record. This seems to be on every budget presentation we've been doing, at least since I've been with the city. This is what the city contributes per employee, and so it's gone up for next year, 0.75 for non-law enforcement and 1% for law enforcement. Total impact on general fund employees is about $1 million. This is mandated by the state treasurer's office. There's nothing we can do about it. It's been going up about that same rate every year and is a big pressure every year on the system. We're in constant contact with League of Municipalities on just what this impact is to us on an annual basis, but it doesn't provide any additional benefits, doesn't make any changes to the retirement system, but it kind of helps continue funding for that retirement system. And lastly, the increased city contribution for employee health care. Since there's an increased contribution on the city side, and again, the general fund has the most employees versus all of the funds, and so that's going to be a big driver there. For operating costs, we talked about that $1.2 million on the capital side for the ERP upgrade. There's also annual operating costs associated with that. However, in the first year after we go live, we're kind of going to have the systems that are being replaced going simultaneously. But then once we're fully transitioned, those other systems will go offline, and there will be some savings in future budgets from us only having, not running at the same time. Other drivers on the operating side, the increased allocation for street resurfacing, which we touched on. Our vehicle replacement charges are up about $422,000, just with increased costs to fund our vehicle replacement program. And we touched a little bit on some of the police software. On capital outlay, this is mostly the fire apparatus replacement program, which we talked about, and also the other fire equipment, as I mentioned, station generators, thermal imaging cameras, and jaws of life sets. There's some debt service in the general fund. This is more kind of equipment or things as noted there. IT has some debt service on some of their equipment. We pay some police debt service for body-worn cameras. And then while we try and pay cash or fully fund a replacement engine, there is some other apparatus replacement from years ago that were debt financed, and so there's some fire debt service payments on that end. Then lastly, interfund transfers out, and these are just some general fund contributions or subsidies to these areas. There's transfer to the debt service fund, the general capital projects fund, so that's about $3 million to fund capital. General bond capital projects, this is the repayment of the interfund loan for City Lake Park. And then the general fund subsidy for transit, so that totals $1.765 million for the proposed budget, which is about 29% of the total transit budget. And the general fund subsidy for the parking fund, which is $175,000, which is about 26% of the total parking budget. Next, we'll touch, again, a little high level here on the enterprise funds, specifically water, sewer, electric, solid waste, and stormwater. So as we mentioned earlier, there's a proposed water sewer rate increase of 8%. This increase would be for increases in personnel costs, operating costs, including supplies, chemicals, equipment, major infrastructure needs for the system, as well as revenue bond debt service payments. In addition, we had several items this year talking about the city's share of the Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority, or PTRWA's infrastructure improvements to combat emerging contaminants. That share is also driving part of this rate increase. The water sewer fund does not have an appropriation of fund balance. It does have 2 full-time positions added, which we talked about a little while ago, and PAYGO capital projects totaling not quite $13 million. Looking at the electric fund, there's no increase to electric rates. There are changes to some electric fees, mainly a consolidation and updating of the outdoor lighting fees. Some of this, an example of what are we updating. The current fee schedule still mentions mercury vapor bulbs, which are not really available anymore. And so it's kind of catching things up and also consolidating those fees. And also the Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard, or REPS charge, and that's just something that we charge, but it's passed through to the power agency. I mentioned those customer service things we talked about earlier, because the customer service department is budgeted within the electric fund, and so that's why you see it here. Wholesale power costs of $75 million. and PAYGO capital projects totaling $21.41 million. I will note that $16 million of this is for construction of an EOC electric operations center. Just touching lightly on some of the other major enterprise funds, solid waste. We talked about the proposed fee increases, and then some of the other fee changes. An increase for dead animal pickup. This would be for veterinarians who are using this service. And also an elimination of the red box rental. This is a service that's just not really utilized anymore, and so there's a proposal to eliminate it. And then PAYGO capital projects totaling a little over $7 million, but this is driven by a $5.7 million appropriation for the next phase of expansion at the Kersey Valley landfill. On the stormwater side, no proposed changes to fees. They do have PAYGO capital projects totaling about $950,000. We'll talk about the capital improvement program, very high level. There's an appendix in the presentation which includes the full list of capital projects, and we will talk about them in more detail at next week's work session. But we kind of break it down by fund, and so general capital, about $4.185 million. 2.557 of this is local dollars. There are some other revenue sources for some other projects there. I'm not going to read the totals to you. I'll just note on transit, of that $645,000, $298,000 is local dollars. The rest is funded through state or federal revenues. And on solid waste, as I mentioned, there is about a $5.7 million project, and that's funded by the post-closure fund, not the solid waste operating fund. And the full list of proposed projects is in the appendix, and next week's work session we'll get into more detail on the specific projects within these areas. And so before we talk about the calendar, as the manager alluded to, if you have questions, we will generate responses to anything we can ahead of next week's meeting. Generally, the response package is a combination of slides in the presentation, but also kind of, a Word document or PDF document that we're kind of adding to as we go through these work sessions. And I'll just remind you of the action of the item at tonight's council meeting to approve this calendar and officially set the public hearing date. So going through the proposed calendar, next Monday, May the 12th at 4 p.m., a budget work session. And so we'll hear from the Market Authority at this meeting, as well as talk about more detail on the capital improvement program and on the fee schedule and any other items that come up leading up to that meeting. And then on Monday, May 19th at the City Council meeting, we'll hold the budget public hearing. The following Wednesday, May the 21st, we'll have a budget work session. We'll provide responses to any questions that have come up between the work session on the 12th and the 21st. And we'll also hear from Visit High Point and Downtown High Point as they traditionally come during the budget time, talk about everything going on with their budgets. And then Wednesday, May 28th, this is the if needed, another budget work session. And then tentative budget adoption scheduled for the first council meeting in June, on June the 2nd. And that concludes the presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Stephen. Are there any questions from council for staff?
Not right now.
What was the business registration fee revenue before?
Generates about $65,000 per year.
And Mayor, if I may, the manager just gave me a good reminder. If you all, leading up to the adoption of the budget, have any conflicts of interest for any of the votes, as usual, like we've done in the past, please let me know in advance and we can talk about those and then be prepared during the budget vote to handle those. Thank you.
I noticed on the screen, we'll be hearing from Visit High Point and Downtown High Point. We're not hearing from Market Authority at some point too.
We do. We have the Market Authority, I think is scheduled for the 12th.
The 12th, okay.
There was a conflict in scheduling. Usually we hear from all three at the same time, but they're gonna come on the 12th and then we'll go to the others. No problem there. But we'll hear from all three. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Next item. Say that again. Next item on our agenda is a presentation regarding water quality. For that, we'll recognize our Assistant City Manager, Damon DeCane.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. Now we got through all that boring budget stuff. Talk about water district. Yeah, Steve is right there in front of me too. I know this is what you've all been waiting for. So, water distribution and water quality. Recently, council heard from some citizens at a public hearing and about water quality. And there were some ensuing discussions about people who were in the room and from others. And we thought it would just be a good time to get in front of all of you as we start sort of an education campaign for folks on these sorts of topics. Like where does the water come from that we get from our taps? How does it get to the tap at all? How do we make sense of that? What are some common quality concerns that people experience with their water? How is it regulated? And most importantly, how can you be sure that what you're getting is not only compliant, but it's a high quality product? So I hope to kind of cover that. This slide, actually this graphic, when I pulled it off the internet, because that's where I get all my stuff, it was actually pretty good, and it's going to speak to another map that I have later. But this is really a very simple version of how the water system works. There's a source of water. So it could be anything, a reservoir, a well, or whatever. That water leaves that source, it heads to some sort of a treatment facility. Then it goes through a system that distributes that water. That system will have some form of storage, which allows for pressure. That's what the elevated tanks are for. So when people call you and say, hey, can you adjust the pressure of the water system? The answer is no. The height of the tank is determined, and that's where it is. And we can only fill the tank a little higher to raise your water pressure. So that's actually, everybody kind of chuckles at that, right? But we get those calls. When I worked in Arizona, people would say, hey, the water's hot in the summer. The cold water's hot. And I'm like, sure is. And they're like, well, you need to change that. I'm like, we can't. God has to do that. So at any rate, it goes through the tanks, comes out, and then it goes through a system of pipes, and we have over 600 miles of those in our service area, and gets delivered to the consumer. And so we're only going to cover the first half of this exciting topic, because the wastewater side is for another day. Okay, any questions so far? Great, I'm killing it. Okay, so our sources of water for the city of High Point are actually threefold. We have City Lake, Oak Hollow Lake, and Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority, which Stephen just mentioned, and we've talked about many times over the past year. In order to get that water to the treatment plant from both lakes, we have two raw water pump stations. Raw water is exactly that. If you went up to the lake and drank that water, that would be raw water, and we do not recommend that. Okay, it's not been treated. That's what raw water means, it's pre-treated water. And then when it gets out into the system, we have 3 elevated water storage tanks and a ground level water storage tank. But what I really want to spend just a little bit of time on after this slide is the map. So we have Ward Water Treatment Plant. That's where the majority of the water that's consumed by the city of High Point residents and businesses comes from. We send out an average of about 13.5 million gallons a day. We're permitted for up to 24. It began operating in 1980. The Finance Committee and the Council approved many projects, high dollar projects related to this operation. It takes roughly 17 people to run it, and it feeds a system, like I said, of about 630 miles of pipes. And by the way, Robbie's sitting here to correct me anytime I say anything that isn't plausible. Okay, so I know this is hard to see. That's not the point of the map, is to dial it in, right? So this map illustrates the total distribution system for the city of High Point's water delivery. And what's important to note is this is where the Ward Water Treatment Plant is, that little green dot. So that means every H2O molecule that comes out of there goes into that entire system. So what we've heard from people from the public is, I live in this section of the city and my water quality is terrible. It's all getting the same water. The same water that comes out of Ward Water Treatment Plant is the same water we have here. It's the same water that goes to my house there, and to Monica's house right there. Our council member Peter's house. I apologize, that was not appropriate. But that is roughly where her house is. So all of the water that goes to the southwest, that goes to the north, that goes to the east, it all comes from the same place. It's all the same water. Which is a little bit mind-blowing, right? That's a lot. So there's a lot of things in between that help the water get there. There's large pipes, there's small pipes. Sometimes we have to pump it. But we get it to where it needs to go. We also have interconnections with Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority, where we receive some water. We have interconnections that we don't necessarily use all the time, but are there for an emergency, with Davidson Water, City of Greensboro, Archdale, and Trinity. So as water travels through these pipes and it goes down a street, if a customer calls in and calls Robbie, which they do sometimes, and they say, hey, I'm having a water quality issue at my house, it's typical water quality complaints are odor, color, pressure. Now, there are many things that could cause an odor, color, or pressure issue. There could be a water main break in the street. In that case, all of the homes downstream of that are going to be affected. And it'll likely cause all three of those issues. So we come out, we shut the water off, we fix it. There's still a disruption of service. Eventually we restore it, pressure's back, the color clears up, and odors go away. Now, if a customer calls in and says, I'm having one of those three problems, and we say, hey, by any chance, did you notice if your neighbors are having a problem? And they're like, no, none of my neighbors are having problems. It sounds like you probably have a local problem to your house because of the design of the system. Remember that first graphic we had up there that showed the pipes that run down the street. So in order for there to be an issue with the water system, it traditionally affects more than one customer. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, and those are honestly, those are rare occasions. And you're going to see as I get to my handout here in a little bit, those are actually on rare occasions. Most of the issues that we come across are either due to, like I said, a main break in the system, a failed valve. Sometimes our operators might actually make a mistake, close the wrong valve or the other one, and result in those things. But those are very short-term problems. So, and that's important because we are subject to a lot of regulation. I'm not going to bother reading those or trying to explain all those in any type of detail, but this is the book that we live by, all those different books and all those requirements on both the water and wastewater side. And so how do we accomplish compliance with all those rules and regulations? Well, it's one simple thing. It's our folks. Our people are licensed, professional water and wastewater operators in the state of North Carolina, and others, some. We have chemists, we have biologists, we have water treatment operators. Robbie, by virtue of the fact that he earned his professional engineering license, allows him to be an operator in responsible charge if he chose. Operator in responsible charge is an important role in water and wastewater. In fact, it's so important that we actually compensate those folks a little higher. So in every step of water treatment and wastewater, we have an operator in responsible charge. The ORC is personally liable for the decisions that are made regarding that system. So our water treatment ORC could be held personally liable if they make egregious mistakes in the water treatment process. Water distribution, same thing. Wastewater collection, same thing. Wastewater treatment, same thing. So we have folks on our staff who have agreed to be held personally liable for egregious mistakes in the name of providing awesome service to our customers. That's pretty incredible, right? I myself am a licensed water and wastewater operator in the state of North Carolina. Do not let me go out and operate things in the water and wastewater systems anymore. I stay current, but I'm book current. I'm not field current. So along with all those folks, we have chemists. We have an incredible lab. And I believe, ma'am, you may have been out to see it when you toured the plant. If those of you who haven't been out to Ward and haven't visited the plant, we, of course, would make that invitation to anyone. Ma'am, I believe you went to, and I can't remember who else.
I missed it.
You did?
I know, I want to do it, so
Okay.
I'll
Councilmember Keeper
reschedule
was
it.
there.
I was there.
Councilmember Keeper was there.
Ah, Councilmember Keeper was there as well. Okay, sorry. I always get lost in that whole national championship basketball thing. So these are the things that our lab do. These are the things that the lab does. They're incredibly busy, they're incredibly reliable, and they also do a lot of the response to our water quality questions when they come up out in the community. Anyone who's having a water quality problem can just call 883-3111 and we'll be out same day. And we don't mess around. It's not like a pothole that says, hey, we'll pave it in the morning. If you're having a water quality concern, we're going to come out and address it right away. That's how important it is to us. Okay, so the timing of this presentation is not a coincidence. Tomorrow, starting tomorrow with the first set of bills that go out for the month, customers will be receiving their annual consumer confidence report or annual water quality report. And I have a copy for each of you, right here. I didn't hand it out early because I know you'd want to read it instead of listen to me speak. So if we can just pass those down. It's widely advertised. It's advertised in the news. It's going to be mailed to every customer in the city this year. So whether you receive a paper bill or not, it will be mailed to your location. It can also be found at that link, or just go to Public Services Water Quality, or again, you can call, we'll get it to you. But we are required every year to report on the water quality of the previous year to all of our customers. So next slide is the spoiler alert slide. It says, here's what it says. Drinking water continues to be safe. It's not bolded because that should be your expectation, right? This is what we do, and we're proud of that. The quality met or surpassed all state and local federal standards. There's one violation in there, and it's much like the other violation that people brought up. We sent samples via courier to a contract lab. They arrived late. Courier's fault. All of the results of the samples were within parameters, but the regulators decided that we needed to tell our customers that we had late samples. So again, no non-compliant water ever left anywhere, but we did what we were told, and we're as transparent as we're required to be. In fact, we're more transparent than we're required to be, frankly. And at the end of the day, we're just going to continue to operate as we have, protectors of public health, and deliver high-quality, safe drinking water. Your water and wastewater staff, stormwater, and others who work in water quality, whether directly or indirectly, know that they are in the confidence business, okay? 100% in the confidence business. If we had a street that had horrible water quality problems, that would be translated into the city of High Point does not know how to provide high-quality water to their residents. I can't tell you how seriously staff takes this job, how serious the manager is about it, how serious we know all of you are about it, but we are in the confidence business. If I told all of you that those bottles of water on the desk today were filled from Flint, Michigan, what would your initial thought be? Uh-oh, right? That was 10 years ago. But when you say Flint, Michigan, it's unfortunate, right? Because they solved that problem a long time ago. It's not a problem anymore. But you know what that means when people say that. And so we want to make sure that we never have High Point associated in that form or fashion. So we're very proud of our staff. We thank all of you for the support that you provide to the staff, the equipment, the projects. We know they're high dollar. They're also critical. We wouldn't have anything that we have in this city if it wasn't for the water and wastewater services that came before it.
Water bottles.
So it's High Point's finest. So with that, I had 40 minutes. I used like 10. I'm happy to take any questions, and for those I can't answer, Robbie is certainly.
I wanted to follow up with, several of us went and met with the members of the Southside community. There were several community members who spoke at public comment and who you said you would follow up with, so I wanted to give you the chance to.
So we did follow up the very next day. There's been multiple follow-ups, but they've not returned the call for us to go out and visit. I have talked with another council member, Monica Peters, and then also Michelle McNair. We talked with her probably 3 weeks ago, and she was going to reach out as well, but we still, to my knowledge, have not been contacted by anybody from that community.
And I think one of the things that was brought to light there was that a program from UNCG had come through the community several years ago and installed whole house water filters on several homes in that community without any service to the filters since then. So they were operating with old filters on those homes, and many of the people who cited these problems were part of that program. So what can we do to help mitigate some of the harm that might have been caused by that?
Education of the resident. And so one of the residents in particular, we have had several interactions with regarding that exact scenario that you described. And that is not a scenario that's unique necessarily to High Point. It happens all over. The whole house filter thing is a problem. It's like any filter. If you don't maintain it, it fills up with the things that it filters, and then it's rendered useless, and it passes all those things through and collects all kinds of other stuff that it shouldn't. And so what we've done is we've reached out not only through those, but we've talked to the pastor who was there that night. We've talked to the neighborhood association president to try and get the word out. I mean, and we've actually showed up at the houses and still can't get a response. So I don't know what else the city can do short of that, is other than if any help that the council can help in that with those specific individual scenarios would be helpful. Because what they really need to do is, as you can see, the water quality report, water's fine. You don't need those filters. Just eliminate the use of those, and that will eliminate any problems that they're having from them.
Amanda, did I tell you about my conversation with the resident? Okay, I'll fill you in, but yeah, they, because I even offered to come meet them with staff, and they're like, no, we're okay, so they didn't want.
I just think it's important to follow up on that because that was all said on the record at public comment.
Yeah, well,
And
it
so I
was-
wanted people to know that we have attempted to,
Right,
to
and
address those issues.
they admitted that they had gotten the call, and they said they don't want anybody to come out there, and I said, I'll come too, but I think like about those filters and stuff, like, and I know that Robbie said this that night also, and I've heard it, but, if somebody has an issue and then you come out, then they would be able to tell, is it the pipes, is it the water filter? So if they have a problem, but they won't let the staff come out, then there's not really anything we can do, because we gotta figure out what the problem is before we can come up with a solution, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, I went out to Southside that weekend following the public comment conversation, attended an event, met with a number of folks, spoke to Reverend Barnes and Tony Collins, and made sure to share as much information. We had just gotten some really good information from the manager that updated us on Southside and the water down there. And it's true, perception, unfortunately, for many folks can drive conversations and fears, but credit to our staff who do an awesome job of answering questions, helping to maintain that confidence. Also appreciation to members of this council for taking the concern seriously and taking time to go down there and support them in these discussions. But Southside is as much pride of High Point as any other neighborhood. And we think it is important that we continue to support them and love on them in the best way possible, because every part of High Point is High Point. So, thank you.
Well, and I think an important thing that was pointed out too is that, as science and technology have changed, some of these communities are operating with older infrastructure than perhaps some of the newer parts of High Point. And so they have longer history, they might have had different interactions with previous staff that would reduce the amount of trust that they have. And so I think continuing to go and respond and make sure that we can build new confidence where it might be lacking is really important too. So I'd love to see continuing to try to make sure that they feel that it's resolved.
And I think that, and I've learned a lot, but inner city watersheds typically have higher levels of different things that aren't as what you would really want to have in like your stream. And I think what happened is when there was some conversation about the quality of the water that was actually in the stream, people immediately thought about their drinking water, because you kind of start thinking, well, there's the water that flows near my house, maybe that's the water. So I think your presentation was amazing to really show that every household in High Point, the water comes from the same place. So I think we need to just kind of try to address, and I know that Robbie has with the sewer, they do have the oldest sewer lines in the city of High Point. So I mean, there's definitely things that we need to address, but yay, the drinking water is perfect. Good job, David.
Any other questions for staff on this item? Okay, thank you so much again for this. At this time, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion recognized the Mayor Pro Tem, second recognized the Councilmember Peters. Any discussion on the motion to adjourn? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it, we are adjourned.